You're looking at our next project. It's 40 years old, it's rough, and it's high on the endangered species list. In 1967, this LeMans sold for $2,600. The GTO cost only $300 more. Today, a decent GTO is hard to find and very expensive. So cloning one from a LeMans became very popular. In fact, it's really hard to find a LeMans that's still a LeMans. So we're gonna do our part to preserve history. We're gonna save this one. It wasn't tagged a true muscle car, but the 326 was no slouch. So we'll rebuild it. But the hood's from a GTO and it's gotta go. The rest of the car is pretty much intact and salvageable. Well, almost. We're gonna keep this thing about 90% original. But what's it gonna cost to do that? You need to know before you buy it. Otherwise, you may not finish it. And sometimes your passion and your checkbook just aren't good friends. So let's make a list. It all starts with the body. The top of the fender looks really good, but I gotta see what's under there. This wood screw isn't factory. Neither is this anchor. But the metal's not bad. The rest of the rocker looks scary, but it's in surprisingly good shape. The doors are in great shape, and the hinges are rust-free. Got lucky here too. Now the rear quarter panels are a different story. Too much rust on top, and too much fiberglass below. Now this would scare a lot of guys off, but it's really not as bad as it looks. They repop this rear panel, and you can get a new rear bumper. As far as the taillights go, we're gonna have to check the catalog. The trunk pan's more like a colander, and the passenger side quarter speaks for itself. The door's in good shape. This fender's probably the best part of the whole car. The front bumper needs to be re-chromed, the grille we can save, and the headlight bezels need some metal work as well. And that's the major selling point. Almost all the trim is here. If you can't buy it, you can refurbish it. Inside, the seats are perfect. The carpet's rotten, the dash looks great, but there's a crack in the pad. Some panels are shot, but the liner is amazingly tight. Now that you've got your list, where do you get your parts from? Year One is a good source, as well as some other specialty catalogs, but you may have to find a Pontiac-only salvage yard to get the hard stuff. Two rear quarters in sections, $467. Wheel houses, $270. Rear floor pans, $128. Trunk pan, $385. Reconditioned rear bumper, $289. And the list goes on. Not every part for LeMans is repopped, like the hood, the taillights, the rear panel. You could use GTO parts, or you could get online and start looking for those good used ones. Right off the bat, we found several sites with enough used parts to build a car. Estimation for new and used parts, $4,055. We're gonna prep the body for paint ourselves, add another $2,500 to get it painted, and $1,000 for stuff we might have missed. That's gonna put us at just over $7 grand. Don't let that number freak you out. We could have spent more money and bought a nicer car and had a smaller parts list. But for my budget, the smaller investment up front allows me to buy the parts as I can afford them. Either way, 12 grand, you got one hell of a good-looking car. We're gonna add up the prices for the suspension, engine, and rest of the drivetrain later on in the show. We're gonna finish our parts list to restore this endangered 67 LeMans. To this point, the tally for the interior and body was just under $7 grand. Now we're gonna do the same for everything that makes it go. Our plan is to rebuild this stock 326. Why? Because they too were sacrificed in the making of GTO clones. What would save us a lot of money is if the crank is still usable. After some teardown time, my hopes of that are quickly crashing on the jagged rocks below. Take a look at this. This is paraffin. They put it in oil to help it lubricate. When you don't change your oil, it builds up. And it usually means that there's scarring on all your major moving parts. That's the risk you take. You never know what's inside till you bust it open. But I've never seen an engine this bad. Ooh. Wow, look at that. It's so bad that it's clogged up the screen. It's make or break time. There's a groove on the bearings and scoring on the cranks, but it's not as bad as I thought. According to the factory specs, where we're at now, this crank is still salvageable. Surprisingly, these cylinders are in really good shape. That's pretty good considering the neglect that this thing has suffered. We've got a good block, heads, rod, and crank. This thing's rebuildable. I found a complete kit with everything you need to start it up for about $1,400. Add the machine work to that to recondition your parts, about $1,000. So to rebuild your stock engine, close to $2,400. That's not bad at all, but we found another option that interests us. For $279, Eagle has a stroker crank for the 400 that'll fit our 326, transforming it into a 370, 375. Add an Edelbrock intake with 2 carbs, some custom pistons, rods, etc., along with some additional headwork, and you're looking at just under $5,000 for a serious little torque monster. This stroker crank is made possible because in '67, the 326, the 389, and the 400 all shared the same block, just with different bore and stroke combinations. But we're gonna keep our 326, sorta. So there's 2 options for your engine. You've got some for your rear end as well. If you're gonna run the 326, this one will do just fine. Black paint, rebuild the brakes, spring shocks, you're good to go. But if you're gonna run a stroker like we are, you might wanna consider something a little bit stronger, like a Moser 12-bolt. Either way, refreshing our front suspension is fine. The frame needs to be painted, on or off the body. Add a drive shaft, exhaust, brake, and gas lines, along with something to put your gas in. The last thing to add to our list is roughly $350 to rebuild your stock Power Glide. You could convert it to a 4-speed for about $2,400. Either one will hold up to the stroker, but I prefer the third pedal. Here are your totals. For a rebuilt stock driveline, about $5,500. For a modified driveline, $12,000. To get the body work right, $7,000. Cost of the car, $4,000. So, for a very nice restored matching number Le Mans, $16,500. For a very nice restored Le Mans with a stroker, Moser rear end, 4-speed, and disc brake conversion, $23,000. That's the list I worked up before I bought the car, and it's all based on doing the work yourself. You might save some money along the way, but you'll find stuff to eat that up. If this were a weekend project for me, it'd take a couple of years, but through the magic of TV, about 5 shows. Till then, go out, find your dream car, and get busy. Later.
Okay, you muscle car fans, you've seen Lou cut, chop, and burn his way through projects. Today, the softer side of Lou as he begins a simple restoration project. Well, almost.
Of all the cool cars out there, you're probably wondering why would we restore a '67 Le Mans? It's because they're very high on the endangered species list, and they're getting harder to find every day. Time hasn't been too nice to them, not to mention they're just real easy to clone into a GTO. In fact, most goats you see today started as Le Mans. They're the same body with different options. Even the aftermarket caters to that trend. So we decided to save one and came up with a cost-effective plan before we bought it to end up with a beautifully restored matching numbers piece of history, 16.5 engine and all. Or for about $6,500 more, we can convert it to a 4-speed, add a tougher rear end, stroke that 326 out to 375 with about 400 horse. That's more than the factory GTO offered in '67. Talk about little brother kicking your butt. Now we're gonna blow this car totally apart, and how you do that can affect the cost of it, not to mention how well it goes back together. It's pretty scary how the first bolt I attack, I gotta cut off. We already determined which parts need to be replaced, but to keep costs low, take every part off like you're gonna reuse it. In fact, you hardcore resto guys would do just that. But it's not too easy for an old thrasher like me to tear things down slowly. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm not a fan of clones. A lot of them are built to fool the unsuspecting buyer, strictly for profit. And with parts availability the way it is nowadays, it can easily be done. But there's one thing that they can't change: the data plate. There's a lot of information here. Your paint code, your trim package, the factory in which it was built, but the quickest answer is right here. 37 means it's a LeMans, 42 is a GOAT. If you can't read it, don't buy it. Year One's got a complete breakdown of all the codes listed on their website. 64 was the first year for the GOAT, so that data plate may not be correct. A little more homework is needed. The trim is next. Brent wouldn't let me do it. Something about using the right tool for the right job. A lot of this trim is replaceable, but some of it isn't, so you may have to refurbish a few pieces. Check with your local chrome shop. If they don't do it, they know someone who does. There's new glass available as well, but ours is pretty clear, so we really want to save it. Looks like our budget just got tighter. The sealer was simply too old and too thick. Let me show you my special tool. And I made it myself. She's ready. I'm not concerned about the extra cost. It's the time and cleanup that kills it. We got lucky on the rear. This is a factory install. Let's seal it. When we got the car, we were worried about the rust under the vinyl. Ours isn't that bad. Good thing that can wreck a budget. We're saving money on the inside as well. Most of it's really nice, considering it's 40 years old. Now we've got the car stripped down far enough to where we can separate the frame from the body. I'm gonna leave the doors on just to help keep everything straight. I could use our lift over there, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna separate them just like you guys would do at home in your driveway. With the body bolts removed, use a temporary cross member and a jack to separate them, far enough to slide in these longer supports. Then tack them in place. With some extensions, raise it high enough to clear the tires, then rest it on the jack stand. Not bad for a few hours worth of work. Now I wouldn't leave it this high to do the body work on it, but once the chassis is clear, you can lower it down. You could even put it on some rollers. Now a frame this old with obvious repairs is more than likely gonna need to be straightened. And we're not spending all this time and effort to roll down the road sideways. After the break, I'm gonna show you how to prep this frame without a trip to the media blaster. We're back on our LeMans restoration. The body is stripped and the frame is out. Before we can see what condition it's in, a good pressure wash is in order. At least that's what it looks like to the neighbors. In reality, we're sandblasting as well. For $100, we bought this wand with this inlet tube that you could use with either glass beads or sand. The more PSI, the better the effect. Most media and even sand is considered a carcinogen. The dust cloud can kill you, as well as your neighbors. If you don't believe me, check out the EPA laws in your state. This combination eliminates that danger, since the water keeps it on the ground. When it dries, use precaution in the cleanup. We're using a sand and recycled asphalt mixture. $7 a bag, about 5 bags will do it. Total cost, $150 plus water. Now it doesn't go as deep as a media blaster does for $800 to $1,000, but it is a really good start on our sanding. As far as the smaller parts go, we're gonna clean them up in our blasting cabinet. Just like the body parts, we're saving everything. The rear end, transmission, and spindles will go into storage. Somewhere down the line, you may want to put this back to a matching numbers car. Now it's time for my favorite chore, framework. Using the mounting holes to measure from, we can figure out just how twisted it is. The center is still square, so we'll lock it down to the jig. We knew the rear half of the frame was messed up from the previous repairs. It's got to go about a ½ inch over that way, but what we didn't expect to find is what we found up front. This gnarly hole is where they pulled the frame straight from a previous encounter. The problem is that they pulled the frame about an inch too far over. So that means our back end goes like this and our front end goes like this. I don't know how this thing even rolled down the road straight. We'll tie the frame together here, because this is where it needs to bend. Then brace it to the jig so it doesn't move side to side. And more bracing to keep it parallel to the floor. With a come along, some chain, and lots of heat, we should be able to straighten it out. This marker will tell us how successful we are. That's a good ½ inch. It's a little bit more than what we need. We're gonna let it cool and see where it settles. Now the back will be real easy. Being that it's a box, all we gotta do is square it up. This needs to be at 54 inches. It'll flex back some, so we'll over pull it a little. The center didn't move during any of the pulls, so let's see how well the front end settled. I'm happy with that. To keep the frame from twisting on the road, we'll brace it up here in the corner. And add more here for the rear end. Now the stroker motor we're building will also cause a lot of stress here in the center. And boxing it in will eliminate that chassis flex. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. Some guys say it's stronger if you put it about a ½ inch in and weld it up. The thing that's nice about this, it gives you room to run your brake lines and fuel lines. Other guys will mount it flush and bend it over, creating a nice overlap joint. But for our purposes, we're just gonna butt it up and weld it. Once the inside of the frame is prepped, we'll protect it with some weld-through primer. Brent's gonna sand down the entire frame. 2 reasons. We need to paint it, but more importantly, this will help us find any cracks or weak spots that also need attention. Anything serious would have shown its ugly face when we were tugging on the frame, but even the little things can grow over time. Later in the show, got a couple more neat tricks to show you. So far today, we made good progress on our '67 Le Mans restoration project. We pulled the frame, pulled it straight, and boxed it in, then sanded it down for paint and final inspection. We poured over every inch of it and found nothing. This thing is solid. Now we could prime and paint it the way it sits, but to dress it up even further, let's lose this Swiss cheese look by filling in all the unnecessary holes. There must be at least 30 of them. They were used in the assembly process for forging and alignment, and the only thing they're good for now is a place for dirt and wasps to hang out. The larger ones will need plugs. You can buy a bag of different sizes, or make your own. The TIG wire will work as a handle to set it flush. The smaller ones can simply be filled in. Now, we didn't have to go through all of this, but for that guy who wants to stick his head underneath and find fault, he can just keep on looking. This could take a while. So while Brent gets a suntan, I'm moving on to the suspension parts. We want to keep the stock look, but these simply aren't designed for what we want to do. Up until the early '80s, there were no tubular control arms for strength, and drop spindles to lower your ride height were really rare. You had to solve these problems yourself. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna plate the lower control arm for strength, then we're gonna cut our spring pocket and raise it up to lower our ride height. We'll do the plate first. This is 3/16 stock, the same as the original. These aren't flat, so make sure your template allows for enough steel for some persuasion. Find a way to lock the arm level. Mark a 1/4 inch around the hat in a slight spiraling pattern. You don't want the 2 ends of your line to quite intersect, Because of that, a cutoff wheel is your only choice. When the line makes a full circle, join it with a notch. With a rounded 1-inch band of equal stock, start it at the notch. Bend it and tack it as you go. The reason for the spiral, it guarantees the top gets put back on correctly. Check your level before you make it permanent. This is our stock arm, and this is what we finished up with. That guy sticking his head under the car won't notice the difference except for that mysteriously low ride height. Now, to lower the rear end, they could have raised this spring bucket just like we did on the front end, but it's really difficult to do with the body on the car. Now, when I was a kid, I used to watch guys heat their springs and lower the car. The problem with that, you heat them too much, you're buying new springs. Or you could get your big cousin Tony, throw him in the trunk of the car, and as long as he kept his mouth shut, everybody was cool. I'm happy with the way this frame turned out. It's straight, it's solid, it's looking good, and it's ready to be primed and painted. We're gonna stop here for now and get this thing to the blasting shop. Now that pressure washer, sand, and water combo, way too tough for your body panels. Next step for this project, transforming our 326 into a modern-day stroker. Later.
Muscle Cars Le Mans project held an ugly secret. But it doesn't scare Lou. Yes, he can build engines. And yes, they run.
It's time for another muscle car, and it's time for me to clean up the mess we made last week. Usually I can pick the projects that we do, but this week, the project made that decision for me. Last week, we pulled a frame out from under our 67 Le Mans, straightened it up with some heat and pulleys, added some bracing, boxed in the rails, filled in all the unnecessary holes, then sanded it down. That was a lot of time and effort, and we're not gonna push that frame aside and let the rust reclaim it. So today, Brent's finishing it off with some primer and chassis paint. Another reason to continue with it, we've got the rear end, the transmission, the disc brake conversion. We've even got the wheels and tires, but the butter on your biscuit, we've got everything we need to stroke out that tired 326. There was less than 50,000 miles on this rather unappreciated engine. Take a look at this. It looked like it could be trashed, but surprisingly, it was salvageable. So we needed to find a shop familiar with Pontiac engines. Who else than Butler Performance in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. The best shops in our industry grew from a passion, and that's what makes the Butlers one of the top engine builders in the country. Horsepower 69 Firebird project was powered by a Butler all Pontiac design aluminum 474. It had the power to throw you in the trunk, so having them handle the machine work was an easy choice. Some fire, bead blasting, a spin in the tumbler, and the bath made this old block look new again. Then it was time for prep, pre-fit, and mic everything to make sure it's right before assembly. All this would be a waste of time without some high-flowing heads, and since no one makes them for the 326, Butler came through again by hogging out our stock ones. You've got to love these guys. But before we go any further, you've probably noticed that we don't have a clean room to build engines in. So my first tip for the day, and after a full career in the Navy, I figure I'm qualified to show you this. You want to fan it out so you can get as much coverage as you can. 2 swipes each side, dunk it. And that'll give us our dust-free environment that we need to build our engine. And if you do it at home, the ladies think it's sexy. Too bad the block wasn't that easy to clean. It's been decked and painted original Pontiac blue. And see this? It's called casting flash. And there was plenty of it in here as well. They ground it all out for better oil flow. Unlike your Chevys, one of your Pontiac oil galley plugs is hidden behind this freeze-out plug. You want to have them both removed in order to clean the block properly. And if your machine shop doesn't know that, you may want to find another one. Something else that's unique about the Pontiac, there's only one place to grind to make room for your stroker crank. Now this Eagle crank will add a 1/2-inch stroke to your 326 through 400. That's because they share the same blocks, just different bore sizes. Now for you younger guys who don't know what stroking an engine means, listen up. You older guys, tell me how the class went. An engine is based on the maximum amount of fuel and air mixture the cylinders can hold, rated by cubic inches. The more cubic inches, the more power. You can increase that amount by boring out the cylinders, or make the piston travel deeper in the cylinder with the longer stroke of the crank. Hence the name, stroker. Less machine work, less money, and it will add more to those torque numbers. With the upper bearings and seal in place, let's move on to prove that theory. Pontiac uses these dowel pins to locate the main caps. It also prevents you from putting them on backwards. On some engines, that is possible. We're not giving torque specs, because every engine is different. But keep in mind, it's important to work from the center out. These Eagle H-beam Chevy style rods are longer than stock Pontiacs. Longer rods mean more torque. Ross custom made these pistons with a dish for 9.5 to 1 compression ratio needed to run pump gas. We're ready for the heads, and look at what we got. This is the result of their porting and polishing. They outfitted the head for screw-in studs and the appropriate springs for our hydraulic roller cam, gasket matched our exhaust ports, gave us bigger intake valves, and cleaned up the chambers. These heads will outflow any factory GTO head any day. Mr. Gasket makes an entire kit for this engine. Torquing down the heads follow the same principle, inside out. Earlier, we slid in a hydraulic cam with increased lift from comp cams. Now we'll follow it up with their roller lifters and rockers. This engine will be sucking more air than the stock manifold could ever give. So Butler's custom tray, along with Edelbrock's P65 replica manifold, and 2 of their 500 CFM Performance Series EFM carburetors will feed it well. To light it up, Mallory makes this electronic 57 Series brakeless distributor. The gear is special order from Butler Performance for this combination. Our goal was not to show you how to assemble an engine. Everybody's got their own method on that. I wanted you to see our parts combination to build a 326 into a powerful 375. Now there'll be a complete build list on the website, but after the break, the dyno's gonna tell us how well we did our homework. We're back. Ready for this thing, man?
Oh yeah, bring it on in.
And Mike's giving up his afternoon nap to give me a hand. The engine's together with no real surprises. Here's what's in the former 326. An Eagle crank with a 1/2-inch stroke, their longer H-beam rods, Ross custom pistons for 9.5 to 1 compression, original heads were hogged out by the Butler boys, hydraulic valve train from Comp Cams, and Edelbrock took care of all the intake. After a 40-minute break-in, retorquing the heads,
Watch that throttle.
I'm ready to see if the spirits of the chief are gonna shine on us. First pass, 357 horses. With some in-car tuning, we'll hit that predicted 400 mark. But that's not all. At 2,500, we're making 362 foot-pounds of torque at idle.
Can't go wrong there.
So, I mean,
That'll get the boat moving.
Right, for the street, it'd be perfect, man. I mean, it's perfect. Cost, a little under $5 grand, or about 12 bucks a horsepower. Not bad. While this cools down, here's what Brent got done. The first coat was an etching primer, really the only thing to use on freshly ground steel. Followed by 2 coats of high-gloss industrial enamel from Auto Body Color. This is plenty tough for the protection that we need, and at least half the cost and time of base coat clear coat applications for those high-end jobs. We're gonna put the frame back together, starting with these polyurethane bushings from Prothane. Now, if this was a concourse restoration, I'd be losing major points for this. But these will last forever, giving a firmer ride by tightening everything up, unlike the original rubber, which allows for some movement. You could use a hammer for all of this, but it would take some time, and you'll probably end up with one arm looking like Popeye's. If your neighbor has an arbor press, bring back his tools and make up with them. In case you missed it last week, we boxed in the original arms for strength and raised the caps to lower the ride height without losing that stock appearance. With the inner shaft grease, a little more will help get them in place. Here's some more points reduction on the concourse, but well worth it. Stainless steel brakes offers a complete disc brake conversion for the B-body that borders on a racing application. This is all the stuff for the front. We haven't even unpacked the rear yet. These spindles are really close duplicates of the originals. They're modified for more brake options, but without screwing up your steering geometry. These steering parts are stock. We got them from around the corner at O'Reilly's. Except for this steering arm, a little touch-up is all it needed. Even stock parts are fun to put on. Back to the brakes. The hubs are bolted to the rotors in case you need something besides these vented and slotted 13 inches. The 4 oversized pistons and the aluminum calipers will keep you from calling your insurance agent. And these top-loading pads are just like the big boys at the track. They even threw in some braided line to hook things up. Now, this is as far as we can go on our front end for right now, because our brake booster and master cylinder hang on a non-existing firewall. We do have the stuff to finish up the rear end, though. These trailing arms are stamped steel, and they have a tendency to flex. Boxing them will take care of that. This 12-bolt rear end from Mosier comes with a Detroit True Track, and these bolts will allow me to lock down the carrier bearing caps, reducing gear and bearing flex. Most GM axles are held in place with C-clips, but these 31 spline axles are held in place with these 4 9-inch housing ends, using retainer plates to hold them in. So if you blow your ring and pinion, your axles won't become projectiles. The rear brake smart conversion kit use 11-inch rotors, and these caliper pistons rotate as they come out, applying even pressure to the pads when braking. Plus, they don't recoil as far. Later on in the show, I'll install the rear end, finish up the chassis, and if we're lucky, we're gonna drop in the engine and tranny. Earlier in the show, Butler Performance took our 326 and turned it into a 375. Back at the shop, we assembled it and ran it on the dyno. The frame was painted, the front suspension was installed, axles went in the rear end, and disc brakes all the way around. The frame is just about ready to go on the ground. Our original trailing arms are good to go. It's time to install the rear. With it lined up and the upper trailing arms on, I can now put in my stock springs and then attach the lower trailing arms from the axles to the chassis. I need to order my wheels, so we went to Trucks and borrowed theirs from their S10K. They were done with them. These will work till we get ours. This flywheel is part of the D2 series clutch setup from Zoom. It uses a dual disc that works as a 1-2 type engagement. Basically, it acts as one, whether you're taking it easy or slamming the gears. This floater cage has a friction ring in it that's been cryogenically treated to help resist warpage. It's what they do, they heat it up real hot, then they throw it in a vat of liquid nitrogen, making the steel stronger. The cool thing, the discs are marked pressure plate and flywheel side to avoid any confusion during installation. This hydraulic throwout bearing is from McLeod, so there's no linkage adjustment. This Lakewood scatter shield is boom-proof. If the clutch blows, I won't be counting my toes. Backing up the stroker is a Richmond Super T10 4-speed. That's the easiest way to install an engine, and it's gonna stay there. The finished body will be reassembled around it. Our lowered front end was brought down a little bit by the weight of the engine. The rest of the car will finish it off. We put stock springs in the rear for now. When it's all complete, we can order the correct ones to level it out. We've done a whole diaper's load of work this time, and it's always nice to take something that's 40 years old and make it look like a baby again, except this baby's been genetically improved. Later.
Today on Muscle Car, with cut-off tools, 5 boxes of Clecos, a little of this,
Boom, chicka, wow, wow.
some of that, and 200 pounds of pudding, Lou made another show.
Some of you may recognize our refabbed, realigned, repainted, not to mention repowered frame for our soon-to-be restored 67 LeMans. Now, I just got our body back from the blaster, and we're gonna see exactly how accurate our parts list was. Now, every time I say the word blaster, you guys who prefer to do chemical dipping bombard me with emails. Well, let me tell you, it's all personal preference, and here's why I prefer to blast. If this car were dipped, you'd have some really clean loose metal. But the media blasting blows away everything that would fall off in the next couple of years, and it's the only true picture of what you're working with. We knew the floor pans were shot, but because blasting shows weak metal better, we found somewhere we didn't expect. And a real surprise, we looked here but couldn't see how bad it was till the media took it away. Sometimes well-sealed mud will stay during dipping. All our mud is gone, so we can see problems like this. Hey, I don't care how you do it. You already know how I'm gonna do it. The bottom line, a lot of this car needs to be cut out. So today, all of this will become part of the LeMans. Since this is a frameless body, we'll need to distribute the load so it doesn't buckle. The floor bracing still looks good. We'll mark up the floor so we don't destroy one. This looks like a plastic surgeon's layout for a facelift. Probably for your favorite has-been celebrity. Let the surgery begin. We already laid in a new floor panel to see what to cut out. The tin left on the bracing is spot welded. They make a tool for that. We both agree a drill bit is faster. We got really lucky. As bad as these floors were, normally you'd have to drill out these spot welds, lift up the rocker, slide the floor underneath, and reattach it. But being that this is solid on the edge, all we're gonna do is lay down the floor and weld it up. One last comment about plastic surgery. Do they really think that they're fooling anybody but themselves? We should all age gracefully, like our producer, Don. Year one supplied most of the parts for this project, like these pans. They're slightly oversized and need to be trimmed, along with a little bit of the floor. Then we can mark the underside to determine where the rosette holes will need to be, some weld-through primer in the braces, and it's time to weld them in. These pans fit good, but not perfect. They may not lay on the bracing flush, but some self-tapping sheet metal screws will draw up the gap. There's a lot of holes and gaps to fill, but this gets rid of about 30% of our rust. Here goes another 60. When we bought the car, we knew all this had to go. A little bracing will keep what's left from collapsing. There you have it. We saved the firewall, the rockers, the roof, the B-pillars. The rest is trash. Now you guys are probably thinking, these guys bought a parts car. But the rarer a car gets, the more we're willing to do to save one. You'll see more after the break. We're back. So far we have fended car dippers, cut out all the rotten flooring, made fun of plastic surgery, replaced the floor, whoa, laughed at our producer, and cut away the entire rear half. That's what's left of the car. Well, almost. The rest of the parts are over here, and the wheel houses are next. We need to test fit these wheel houses to see if any modifications need to be done. They're a two-piece design, so I'm going to assemble them first. We're using Clecos to hold them together temporarily. If you've never seen these before, they work like a pop rivet, but you can install and remove them as needed. All the rear tin work will be based off of these. And since the inner quarter is the only consistent part of the car that's left, they're our reference point. We're going with a larger wheel and tire combo, so I'll widen these out to be safe. I'll use some tape as a guide. Now I can start cutting up these brand new tubs. Brent's making these extensions that'll add 1 inch to the tubs. And the flanges will make it easier to weld. With the inner wheelhouse lined up, I'll hold them in place with some more Clecos and then do the same to the outers. Weld them up, smooth them out. It's better to do this while they're out of the car than when they're in. Since we made the tubs wider, something needs to be made smaller, like the rear floor pans. With 1 inch off of each side, that'll do it. We need to save the lip to mount the welds to by simply sliding them underneath and welding them in. Even the factory overlapped them here in the middle. Now nobody's remaking this part of the trunk pan, so saving it's my only option. Plus, it's not as bad as it looks. These corners were shot, but an easy repair. They too need to be 1 inch shorter on each side for the tubs. Looks like the number of saved parts just grew by 1. It's finally time to hang our quarters, and it's starting to look like a LeMans again. Like everything else, a little trimming is in order. Since we're going to attach it on the body line, we've got to cut our panel on the body line. Then we're going to cut it 1/4 of an inch in from the door seam. These panels are designed to overlap the B-pillar, the rockers, and beyond the body line. That'd be the easy way to do it. We're taking the high road and button the panels together. That way she won't have any unsightly seams from overlapping metal. And it won't give that funk any chance to get in there and rot it out. Because you want to keep that funk out of your seams. And I don't mean boom chicka wow wow. All that welding will come later. It's still Clecos for now. It's time to protect the engine and chassis, because it's going back under the body. We cut so much out of it, it would be real easy to screw up the entire rear third if it doesn't align with the frame. And more polyurethane bushings. If you're a true car guy, you probably noticed these custom 18-inch aluminum matrix by Intro. 10-inch wide and back, 7-inch up front, and BFG KDWs for rubber. It took a few weeks to get them, but it was well worth the wait. And I hope you guys can see the vision that we're going for. Something sexy, yet strong, but still all LeMans. And we're going to continue on it later on in the show. Glad you made it back. So far, we cut away about 70% of our LeMans, tubbed out the wheel wells, laid some flooring, and started the quarters. Finally, rolled the chassis back under it and bolted them up. 12 new braces and panels will replace 4 body mounts, support the trunk pans, gas tank, wheel wells, quarters, and rear panel. And this is all that's left of our parts pile. We couldn't go any further till we got the chassis in place because the rear third of this car is literally held in place by all the Clecos. We left the old rear body supports in for now, just to keep things lined up. The forward mounts are next, and again, a little off the sides to make way for the tubs. The same goes for the outer trunk pans. Again, reusing the lip is important. We'll bolt the body mounts in, recheck that the frame rails are level, tie the braces together, position the side pans. Now, sandwich them both to the wheel wells. We can tell we're doing a good job since the inner panel fits so nice. Some things we just have to remake, like this indention will be fun. Some 1-inch tubing, clamps, angle iron will do the trick. You gotta admire a guy who trusts his work this much. Not to mention his faith in Clecos. 200 pounds of pudding. 6 parts on, 6 left to go. We're bracing the fenders together because the rest of the rear is coming out. Don't forget to salvage the things you can't buy, including these body mount nut cages. We can save one, but the other's trash. But that's okay. The fun is in the creation. We knew these tabs were shot, and we'll make new ones later. For now, they'll hold the panel in place. And yes, it's for a GTO. We'll fix that too. Since things seem to be aligned here too, it's safe to put in our side panels that secure to the quarters. Another panel needs making with some rather odd bends. It's the trunk pan extension. Ours was shot. We'll leave a slight overhang till the bumpers are pre-fit. The last 2 braces help tie the pans together, and it also gives the tank something to hang from. Everything to this point has fit really well, but now the true test, the trunk deck. It's really close, but not quite perfect. And that's why we burned through almost 200 Clecos. We're not welding it up till it's spot on. We kept our word, our pile of parts is gone. And our LeMans got a facelift, a tummy tuck, it even got some lipo. Now next week we're gonna deal with something that you guys are probably dealing with at home, tin worm carnage. Until then, keep the rust out of your seams. Later. We're almost done for the day, and it's a little too late in the show to start anything in depth, so here's what we got going on. Frank ground the floor to suit his need for perfection. Etching primer applied, normal for raw metal, but also useful for the next step. To protect the underside of the car and act as a sound barrier, we're trying out Duplicolor's truck bed coating. It's a vinyl polymer base and is strong enough to use as undercoating. The cool thing is, you can do it yourself. You can get this little kit that comes with a roller, too slow for us. Or you can get this spray gun with an access lid. We're doing this now, before finishing the body, in case we get sloppy. This gun siphons the goo to the head. A standard airline is all you'll need. To save time, both me and Brent are packing. We're also wearing respirators. This coating requires having fresh air running through your shop. We don't. To protect the other people in here with us, we rolled in our Duster 3000 from Island Clean Air. It's like a portable prep room. Air is forced out of the top to start the circulating motion. holes in the arm blow dust or fumes downward to be sucked in and filtered. OSHA and EPA friendly. You probably know a men's room that could use one of these. A few last-minute repairs and the coating continues. The same principle in painting applies, but instead of multiple thin coats, a little thicker is recommended. It helps with sound deadening and it dries super fast, like us.
Today, Muscle Car adds a new face. The Le Mans gets a new finish, and Lou plays with his parts.
Welcome to Muscle Car. No, we're not having a swap meet. This is our 67 Le Mans. Well, half of it anyway. Today, we're gonna paint and assemble the other half of the car. This project's been going on a long time, and it's taken a lot of work so far. We're keeping to a budget, so we saved everything we could. The frame was pulled, straightened, boxed, and painted. And the old 326 was stroked out by Butler Performance with an updated rotating assembly, intake, and carbs. Prothane came through with the bushings and stainless steel with the brakes. We modified the control arms, put in a Moser rear end, and bolted in a Richmond Super T10 4-speed. We had to replace a lot of steel and make extensive rust repairs. So Brent spent an endless amount of time prepping, undercoating, filling, and sanding. So much, in fact, there's just no way we could show it all. But he eventually gave it the Buttrey seal of approval and laid on his primer. All the body panels have been fitted and aligned, and it's ready for final blocking. Now, a lot of people would have made this a clone, but we don't want another fake GTO running around out there. This one's gonna be all Le Mans. And before we undid Bolt 1, we came up with a budget. We estimated a matching numbers restoration at $16,500. For another $6,500, you can add a stroker kit, 4-speed, and tougher rear end. These numbers are low because we did almost all the work ourselves. In order to keep the costs down, we salvaged as much as we could. These parts are over 40 years old, but they're worth saving. Some of them are even hard to find. Window regulators are a good example. The best thing you can do is clean them up. While the regulator's dry, I'm gonna work on the window tracks. All the rust has gotta come off. And to prevent its return, a little paint does the trick. This will make a nice smooth glide for our regulator rollers. These plastic rollers are replaceable. Ours look good, so we're just gonna clean them up. If yours are damaged, you can try someone like Year One or a major restoration shop. They may be able to help you out. Lube the pivot points and gears with white lithium grease, and they should be good for another 40 years. We won't install these till the doors are painted because the window felts have to go in first. And speaking of doors, Brent found some trouble spots that needed to be taken care of. Rust in the lower door corners is a common problem. All 4 corners on the Le Mans have to be patched so the doors can be painted. Once they're fixed up, a coat of primer, and they're ready for color. In order to get the last little flaws out of the body, Brent's gonna block sand it one more time. The guide coat shows any imperfections in the body. A dark area means that it's a low spot. The roof is gonna be black, which means it's gotta be flawless. So this one has to be filled. Brent's gonna keep sanding on that thing till it's perfect, which is gonna give me plenty of time to fix my pedals. Now this thing originally came with a power glide in it, which is boring. That's why we're putting a stick in it. We couldn't find pedals that were made for a Le Mans, so Kiesler set us up with a set from a 66 to 67 Chevelle, with some modifications to the original brackets that work for us. Because we cut it up, it's gotta be braced or the pedals could wobble, but I've got a plan. I'm welding on a piece of 1/8" plate. That'll give it all the support it needs. The pedals fit perfect and they move well. so we're done with this for now.
Oh, yeah.
That's a third gear chirp. Woohoo! These taillight housing can be saved too. These things look like Swiss cheese. The best thing I've found to fill these smaller holes is silicon bronze. It's a man-made blend with over half a dozen elements in it. Why do I like it? It cools so quick, it doesn't fall through the holes. The edge of this housing has a lot of bigger chunks missing, so I'm patching it with sheet metal. No more Swiss cheese, so they're going into the finish pile for now. We've gotten a lot of small but important things taken care of. It's time for the LeMans to go in the paint booth, and it's not coming out till it gets some custom colors. After the break, it's time for prime.
Who let this guy into the muscle car studio? And why is Lou so hard at work? Find out after the break.
We're back! We've saved a few parts off the 67 LeMans that could have ended up in the scrap heap. Fixed a few trouble spots on the body and sent it into the paint booth. I stuck around long enough to help Brent mask it up, then cut him loose on the primer. The next step in this process is wet sanding. I'm no body guy, so I want nothing to do with it. And I'm tired of waiting for Brent to get this thing done by himself, so I got him some help. Remember this guy? It's Rick Bacon. He's the guy who did the killer flame job on the 63 Impala Pro Mod. He can set just about anything on fire. With paint, that is. Rick's joining the muscle car crew as of today. What's up, man?
Same old, another beautiful day in paradise.
Cool.
How you doing?
I'm peachy, man.
Wonderful. Hey, I've been watching the show. You guys have been working Brett to the bone, dude.
That's the way I roll, man. I don't do body work, so someone's got to suffer.
Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to come in and give him a hand.
Cool. Not only can Rick lay down some wicked flames, he's got other skills as well. Pinstriping, candy apple, pearl, two-tone, graphics, and sometimes all of this on the same car. He's got a creative flair, especially when the project speaks to him.
Now, the foundation for any show-quality paint job is all in the prep work. Now, Brent's already done most of it for us, but I'm going to give him a hand with the wet sanding.
Oh, see you later. I'm busy.
Hey, Brett, oh, there you are, man.
What's going on, dude?
Hey, another beautiful day, man. So where are we at on this thing?
We like this a little wet sanding.
A little wet sand? All right, well, I'm here to give you a hand with it. This thing looks pretty good. Got a little low spot right above the wheel well over here.
Honestly, I've only done 2 cars my whole life.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
No, you sure? Sure, tease the new guy. So where do you think Lou is right now?
It's probably lollygagging with a magazine. Man, it seems like we're the only ones working. We'll take a break.
You gotta ask me twice.
Let's go, Bodie!
Come on, Flash. We in hot pursuit.
Hey, Brett, you know what you call a bald guy? Bald guy with long hair in the back?
No
It
idea.
ain't a mullet, man. It's a skullet.
Dude, we should probably get back to work. Yeah.
Once the wet sanding is done and the residue is cleaned off, anything not getting painted is masked off. Brent's laying down a sealer first. It gives an even foundation for the base coat. Now finally, after dozens and dozens of hours spent on prep, it's time for paint. Auto Body Color and Supply mixed some custom colors just for our LeMans. The Buttrey Black goes on the roof first. Now since the rest of the car is going to be a different color, the black gets masked off. This baby is going to be worth its weight in Santiago Gold.
This is something a chief would be proud of. This project's on the home stretch, so it's time to take it for a ride on the lift to get the plumbing knocked out. The fuel tank is coming out of our big pile of parts, and it's a stock replacement, so it bolts right in. I forgot to order the sending unit, but that's okay, it's on the way. I installed a bulkhead fitting on the bottom of the tank to hook our 1/2-inch line to. This way, we don't have to modify the sending unit to accommodate the bigger fuel line, not to mention our gauge will still work. The line is clamped to the frame rail and attached to the fuel pump. I'm lowering the car and unwrapping the engine so I can get to the carbs. One last line and it's done. For the brakes, I've mounted a T in the engine compartment to feed the front. The proportioning valve and master cylinder will go on later. While I finish these front lines, Rick's turning his attention to the remaining body panels. they need the same treatment as the rest of the body, and that means more prep work. Once Rick's worked his magic, Brent gives him a shot of primer. A few more panels, and we'll be golden.
Now back to Lou and Rick, the new guy, at his first day on the job.
Hey, welcome back. Today we're working underneath our 67 LeMans. The fuel tank and the lines are in, and right now we're plumbing the brakes. A rigid line runs from each rear caliper to a T-fitting. A piece of flex line allows for movement of the rear suspension. One more fitting connects it to the front half of the system. The rear brake line mounts to the frame rail alongside the fuel line. Once the master cylinder is in, we'll make the final connections.
These manifolds from Ram Air Restoration are recasting of the legendary Pontiac Ram Air 4 headers. You can tell just by looking at them. They'll flow better than stock.
But because they're bigger, we got some clearance issues. Now we can't put them in from the bottom because of the scatter shield. So what we're gonna do is raise the motor up just enough to get them in from the top.
Tell me when.
We only need to come up a couple inches for these to slide into place. And here's something you're not going to see in a stock restoration. It's a gear vendor's unit. Now this not only adds an overdrive, which is going to give you better gas mileage, but it also allows you to split all the gears, which is going to make shifting that 4-speed a whole lot more fun.
We're putting it in before the exhaust to make sure there's plenty of room. The old housing is out of there, so's the speedo gear.
So why use an under overdrive unit? Well, you can split second, third, and fourth, turning your 4-speed into a 7-speed. With the smaller RPM drop between gears, you'll have less power loss and better gas mileage.
The first piece of the new tail shaft housing slides on and bolts into place. I'm test fitting the second piece to mark the floor pan. I expected to have to make some room here, but because this is an aftermarket floor pan, I ended up having to cut it. Some finessing of the shaft, and it slides into place. Since we're using big Ram Air manifolds, these 2.5-inch downpipes and exhaust are no problem. This kit from MagnaFlow would bolt right in if it was a standard application, but we're using a gear vendor's, so we're no longer standard. The drive shaft needs more room than we've got, so it's time for some modifications, and I can make it work. The X-pipe marks the spot. Close enough anyway. Then the coleslaw slices through these just like butter. Oh, check that out. Two cuts. Two cuts are better than one. Fitting the pieces of the exhaust can be tricky, so I've tacked in most of them to make sure it fits. Now that it's all lined up, I can weld it back to the mufflers.
While Lou's been over there getting his exhaust flowing, me and Brent have been in here prepping out the fenders and the hood. The wet sanding's all done, and it's ready to get drenched in some more of that Santiago Gold. Now, I could hang out over here and watch him paint, but I think I'm going to cruise over and see how old Lou's doing.
Rick, great timing. Give me a hand pushing this thing. We've gotten a lot done on the LeMans today, but we still have a long way to go. We did get it painted and plumbed, but we still need to take care of the wiring, the AC, interior, and the rest of the body needs to find its home. If all goes well, this baby will be ready for the road, and we'll take you for a ride later. Welcome to the shop. Our 67 LeMans budget project is coming together just as we planned, and we've managed to save a lot of the original parts. Last week, Brent and Rick got the bodywork and paint finished. I took care of some odds and ends, including the brake and fuel plumbing and exhaust.
Now today we need to get the wiring and the AC done, get the interior in, and get the gauges installed. Now I gotta be honest with you here, I hate wiring. In fact, I'd rather drag my through a mile of broken glass than do wiring. So you know what, I'm gonna let Lou take a crack at it. I'm gonna go do the steering column. Now since this car was an auto and we're going 4-speed, the on-the-column shifter and indicator have gotta go. Okay, now you wanna be really careful and save all these original parts here because, aww. Cut-off wheel plus hammer equals no more unwanted pieces. With the wheel pulled off and the guts removed, I can patch the holes. Now for the bigger one, I'm using a piece of steel welded in place. The smaller one gets a glob of JB Weld. And more often than not, you see these old steering wheels thrown in the trash can, but you don't have to do that. You can save them, and it's not that difficult. Rough edges need to be ground down and then filled with 2-part plastic repair. A layer of body filler and a lot of sanding gives it a smooth surface. Now, automotive paint, buttered black, of course, works just fine for the column and the wheel. Now, this thing's looking pretty good, and with a new turn signal switch, it's going to work great also. Now, while I've been bringing the steering column back to its former glory, Brent's been working on restoring some original pieces too. Now, parts that have to withstand rough conditions, like bumper brackets and wheel wells, need something tougher than paint to protect them. Now, that's where powder coating comes in. The parts are hit with a negative charge, and the powder is positively charged, so that once you start spraying, the powder is attracted to the part just like a magnet. Now, once they're coated, it's into the oven. We're looking for a surface temp of 400 degrees, so we need to wait just a few more minutes on these. Now, once it cools, it's tough as nails and ready to use. Why is it rainbow colored? Okay, it's the only color we had on hand. And it's magically delicious.
Wiring a car is not an easy job, but if you take your time, you'll get it right, and it'll save you a lot of headaches later on down the road. This harness from Painless is good because everything is labeled, making it a lot easier. Another great thing about this harness is that the fuse block is pre-wired. I've already bundled up the wires and I'm running them out where they need to go. These run in the trunk, and a strip of hush mat helps keep them in place. Trim out all the lines you're not using and hook up the rest. If you really want to be chilling in your ride, then this add-on's for you. No factory AC? No problem. This kit from Hot Rod Air has everything you need. The best part is you send them your original control panel and they modify it to work with the kit. That means you keep your stock look with just a small knob that you could hide under the dash. If your car came with dash vents, you'll want to use them. The LeMans didn't, so we're going to use the ones that came with the kit. The evaporator mounts under the dash. Remember, this is a universal kit, so you may have to fabricate some mounting brackets. You don't want this thing to land on your feet on a bumpy road. I want to use the original defrost vents because they bolt right in and they fit nice and tight. My only problem is using the one from the kit and being able to join it to the old one. I was told a plastic welder could do this. Now, I've never used one before, but I heard Rick has.
Did someone say plastic welding?
I'll give it a shot, dude.
Okay, this plastic welder kit from Matco is pretty cool, and it's not too expensive. Now, once you know what kind of plastic you've got, and yes, that does mean reading the instructions, then you know what kind of rod to use and where to set your heat.
The book got pictures?
Yes, it does.
All right, then
we're
we're
covered.
good.
We're covered.
Okay.
Now, make sure the plastic is clean so you'll get good adhesion, and move the welder slow enough to melt the base material. Now, the fumes from this thing had our camera guy a little loopy.
You need to use the smoother.
I don't think they're toxic, so he must have some other issues. And yes, the round tip is used to smooth out the rough edges. Now, a few minutes to cool and it's ready to install.
This makes you a plastic surgeon.
Oh! Oh! Yeah, that fits perfect. Now that everything fits like it's supposed to, I'm gonna take some duct tape and wrap it around just to make sure there's no loose edges. That's one vent down, but we've got several more to go. Wire ties are great for this. Everybody's got some laying around, and they're easy to use. Year One supplied us with the radio. It's an original analog style, but it's really a modern digital inside, complete with a CD changer and speakers, because Brent says it's not really a car without tunes. We're making a lot of progress on our interior projects, but there's lots more to go. Brent's installing the gauges, Rick's putting in the quarter glass. After the break, I'm gonna be installing the AC compressor.
Should you tackle headliner installation yourself? Find out after the break.
We're back. I run the AC lines through the firewall, so it's time to mount the compressor. but I've encountered a slight problem. This bracket is made for a 350, not a 326 Pontiac, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody makes one. So I'm gonna do what I gotta do. I'm gonna modify it. I had to get creative. I pulled together some materials I found around the shop and welded everything together to make it work. I used an old extension cord as a mock-up because I didn't know how long the belt would be. Then I tightened everything up, made my measurements, welded it. You want to make sure that the bracket is nice and tight so when the clutch engages, it doesn't twist around and throw the belt.
Now while Lou finishes the AC, Brent and I are working on the interior. We still have a lot left to do. We still have to get the hush mat down, the carpet, the seats, the door panels. There's a lot there. But if you notice, the headliner's already been installed. Now that takes a lot of patience to do and do correctly, and that's a little something we're short on around here, so we called in an expert.
Go ahead and start figuring the code out.
Kevin from Heavy's in Lebanon, Tennessee has done hundreds of these, and he dropped by to show us how it's done. So why are you actually steaming it before you put it in anyway?
These are box wrinkles, and they'll eventually come out if we don't steam them first. But I like to get them out so the job looks right when I'm ready to walk away from it, it's done.
His first tip, lube the bows with WD-40 for easy insertion. So how long you been doing this anyway?
32 years.
32 years. Now make sure you know which bows are which before getting in the car. Guess we're putting the center in first?
Yeah, I got it in my hand.
Now Kevin makes it look easy. Time for me to give it a try. There it is. Not too shabby. Now Kevin's using Weldwood, which is an industrial grade adhesive specifically for this type of job. If you're trying this yourself, search the local hardware store and you should be able to find some. Once the glue is set, smooth out the wrinkles as you stick it down. The edges and corners get trimmed and tucked in, and the welting holds it in place and hides the raw cuts. The sail panels need to be glued in before the rear deck. Now before the headliner was installed, Kevin had the forethought to put screws in all the needed holes as placeholders. When the time comes to install the mirror bracket, visors, dome light, and coat hooks, just feel for the screws and snip the holes. Wow, man, looks like you're almost done.
Just about got it.
Wow, awesome job, dude. Looks beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So what do you think? Could I do this now?
A guy could do it at home if he wanted to, but you have to have a lot of patience and good glue.
Yeah, I tell you. Well, I'm more than happy to let you take care of this one for us. I appreciate it. Okay, now the headliner is in and the dash is looking great. But before we go any further, we're going to insulate the interior with some hush mat. It keeps the car quiet by reducing vibration. Now it's easy to install. Just cut it to shape, peel, and stick. The goal is to cover 75% of the interior surfaces. ACC makes carpet to fit almost any car, including our LeMans. It's molded so it already fits the contours of the floor pan. We have to cut a hole for the shifter, and the best way to do that is to lay it in place and cut it in the car. The seats and sill plates will hold it down.
We want to get as much on the engine as we can while the front clip is off, so we're installing the power steering pump and the alternator, and we're reusing the original brackets.
Hey Lou, don't you want to install the steering column first?
Hand it this way. Since this is the original column, there shouldn't be any problems putting it in. Next comes the power steering pump. Then the alternator. Everything lines up, so we're in good shape. Something you want to remember, coils are full of oil. That's what keeps them cool. So when you mount it, make sure your poles are down low. If you have it where the pole is up top, if there's an air bubble, it'll cause it to burn up, and you'll be going to the store to buy a new one. I'm mounting the coil as close to the distributor as possible. This way I don't have a long coil wire, which means less resistance. I finished up everything I could do in the engine compartment, but after the break, we're going to finish up the interior and start hanging some body panels.
Hey, we got our seats in the LeMans and the interior is done except for just a few more details. Again, we recycled as many old parts as we could, but we did end up having to order some things, like the visors. Now, I've been building and painting cars for a lot of years, and I've been to a lot of car shows, had a lot of cars in car shows. One thing I've noticed time and time again over the years is that even though a car may really grab your attention from across the lot, sometimes you walk over and take a look at it and the interior is trash. You know, you see wires hanging out from under the dash, loose knobs, torn upholstery and whatnot. It really detracts from the vehicle as a whole. Now, I know that the interior may not be the most exciting part of a vehicle build, but it really needs to be done correctly. And if it's done correctly, it can add to the whole experience of driving and comfort and whatnot. And it can actually make it feel like a brand new car. You don't mind driving it to the shows instead of trailering it. Now, I know our LeMans here is still a work in progress, and it's really coming together nice, and it's going to be something that we can be proud of. So I'm going to continue working on it here and see how close I can get it back to stock.
I've still got to get our slave cylinder mounted. This is one more thing that's going to require some modification because of our 4-speed conversion. I'm using this original hole in the firewall, and I've modified the mounting plate. Rick, give me a hand with this, man.
Sure. Now, this is actually the old fuse box hole. We only need to drill one hole, and the wider mounting plate will add the surface area needed to secure it. We modified the pedal with an added piece to line it up with the clutch master cylinder. Sweet, Lou, get it started hanging some body panels.
That's right. The first thing that goes on is the doors, the fenders. After that, we can finish up the wiring, and then the trim and the bumpers.
All right, well, let's not forget about the glass, 'cause I don't like getting bugs on my teeth when I'm driving.
Next time you see the LeMans, we're going to finish it up, and then we're going to be tearing up some pavement. Later.
Hell yeah, let's do this. Today we're going to finish up the LeMans, take her out for a cruise. Now, the last time you saw it, we were almost ready to get the body panels on, but first comes the glass. Dante the glass man came by to give us a hand because he knows more about glass installation than anyone else around here. The trim retainer clips go in first, then he puts on primer to help the bonding. He lays in a bead of urethane adhesive, then carefully places the glass. Now, once it's in place, the trim pops right into the clips. The doors go on next. The alignment holes we drilled make it a breeze to get them on straight. Make sure to attach the inner fenders before putting the fenders in place. The cowl, grill, and repop bumpers went on. Then we finished the doors out with the handles, trim, our refurbished regulators, and finally, glass. Next came taillights, headlights, and turn signals. The hinges, hood, and latches went on. Then we dropped in a hood tack for that signature Pontiac look. The deck lid was the last body panel to go on, and the trim finished it off. But before we could hit the streets, Brent had to take care of one little problem: rear wheel clearance. Because we used aftermarket quarter skins, some trimming was in order to keep from slicing up our BFG tires. After taping up the edges to protect the paint, a cut-off wheel slices off a thin strip of metal. Some grinding smooths off the edges, and some holes are drilled for the welds that will reattach the inner fender. The welds are ground down, sanded off, and once the paint's spotted in, she'll be ready to ride. Our Project LeMans had a budget. Now that she's all done, we can do the math, add it up, and see how close we came to our target. Speaking of numbers, we're kind of curious what this thing would sell for, so we're going to call in an expert right after the break. After hundreds of hours of work, our Project Budget LeMans is finally ready to hit the street. But before we can cruise it, we need to get insurance on it. Just because we're big TV people doesn't mean we can get away without it. So I'm bringing in a guy here, Barry Potts. He's going to come in and give us a hand.
Hi, my friend. Barry? Doing good.
He's a professional appraiser. His job is to come out and tell us what different things are worth. He analyzes every physical aspect of a car, from engine and interior to paint and even upgrades. But it doesn't end there. A lot of research goes into finding the value of a car, so don't expect to get an on-the-spot estimate. So you said that we can expect an appraisal back in a few days?
Yes.
So wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, let me get you all the paperwork and the receipts and stuff that you're requesting, and we'll get you out of here.
Let's go.
It's finally time for me and Brent to give our own appraisal of the LeMans. And nothing but good old pedal to the metal testing is going to tell us what we really want to know.
Hit it, man.
So he hit the streets. It's the first time the girl's seen daylight since her carcass was hauled into the shop almost a year ago. It's a great feeling when all the hard work finally pays off.
I really can't get over how smooth it rides, though.
Yeah, we were both itching for some seat time. The first dent we put in it was the one under the gas pedal. This thing feels like every bit of 350 horse.
Oh yeah, you can feel it.
No stock 326 ever pulled like this.
Purrs like a kitten going down the highway, man.
Yeah, it does. And with a little finessing of the clutch, those BFGs didn't stand a chance. Now that was fun, but for real monster burnouts, nothing beats a line lock. We're running out of daylight and rubber, but we managed to squeeze in just a little more destruction.
Later, man. See you at the shop.
3 days later.
Well, we got our appraisal back, and it's got everything in here that you're going to need to get an accurate insurance policy written on your ride. It's got pictures, documents, whatever they might require. Now, Barry set the value of our LeMans here at $24,500, which is great because our budget was $23,500, and we actually even came in a little bit below that, so we're looking great. And I got to tell you, we took this thing out and beat the tar out of it for like 8 hours straight, and the only thing that's worse for wear, these poor tires back here, they're looking a little ragged. But hey, that's what building muscle cars is all about, man. So we got the LeMans done, and we got to move on to our next project. So for now, we're out of here.